All right, Econ 200. For this series of videos, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news, as you can see, is that now I've moved on to using legal size paper, so we've got an extra 3 inches of space to fill up with graphs and words, so hopefully we'll be a little bit less cramped from here on out through the semester. The bad news is I've been using a kind of a backlight that I purchased for this class, and yesterday that went out, and so the lighting might not be quite as good going forward here, although I'll try to replace it in the next few days if I can, if Jeff Bezos and Amazon are able to get it to me quickly. So right now we're going to begin talking about the course material for, let's see, Chapter 11 on perfect competition. And I want to start with just a short video to go over a few definitions and talk about the two different types of revenue that firms have, which is marginal revenue versus total revenue. So to begin with the definitions, when we're talking about perfect competition, and in the next chapter when we discuss monopoly, we're talking about firms. We're trying to build models of these firms and how they're going to behave given the market structure, the competitive market structure that they find themselves in. And so we need to make some assumptions about how those firms behave. What is it that they're trying to do? Economists typically model firms as profit maximizers, right? Which is just a fancy way of saying that firms are going to do whatever it takes to get themselves the most money. Okay. Now, what that means in terms of these models is mostly going to revolve around how much output do they produce, given the prices that they're facing or the prices that they can charge. But their goal, whether they're facing perfect competition like in this week or next week when the firm is a monopoly, their goal is to maximize their profits. Okay, make the most money possible. Now, in order to figure out what a profit maximizing firm is going to do, we need to have a good idea of what exactly profit is. And so, of course, profits are just defined as follows. Profit, which we also sometimes represent with the Greek letter pi, is equal to the total revenue that a firm earns minus its total costs. And these total costs are going to take some, fairly significant unpacking. That's what the next video is going to be. But to really understand how they can maximize profit, we need to understand what revenue is and what are the different types of revenue, and what cost is and what are the different types of costs that the firm faces. And in this relatively quick video, we're just going to focus on total revenue. The next, or types of revenue. The next video will be the one that discusses cost. All right, so when we're talking about revenue, there's two kinds of revenue that we're interested in, and those are marginal revenue and total revenue. Marginal revenue is just the extra revenue that a firm earns from selling one more unit. Okay, whenever an economist talks about the margin, something being at the margin or something being marginal, what we're talking about is the next of something. Okay, the next unit that you produce, the next unit that you consume, the next person that you hire, the next hour that you decide to allocate to work or to leisure or whatever. Margin just means we're already, we've produced up to this point, and now marginal revenue is how much extra revenue can I get by making one more unit. Okay, and it's going to turn out that the marginal revenue is what really counts for maximizing profit. Now, in a perfectly competitive market, we can make the following assumption, which is that there is some price, just call it P, and at that price, the firm is able to sell all that it wants to. In other words, if a firm in this market, if any one firm in this market doubles its production, triples its production, quadruples its production, that is not going to push the price down. The reason for that is going to be that the firms in this market are all very, very small relative to the size of the market overall. Okay? And so what this is saying is you basically have a supply and demand framework that defines this market, and that supply and demand generates an equilibrium price, right? PE, or the price P. Now, the market is what sets this equilibrium price. As we talked about in our lecture on equilibrium, it's not any one firm that decides that the price is going to be here. This is just generated by the competitive interaction of the buyers and the sellers in this market. Now, if that's the case, that there is just a market price that is just a given, if you're one of the firms in this market, that price is just it's almost as though like God has just declared this is the price that you can sell at. But you can sell all that you want to, okay? As much as you produce is not going to increase the supply enough to push this price down. Then we would say that the marginal revenue in such a market is just equal to the price. Marginal revenue, MR, is equal to P. It's just going to be the equilibrium price in this market. Okay, so that's marginal revenue, how much money you make on the next unit that you sell. And in a perfectly competitive market, that amount is just going to be the price, the market price at which you can sell that unit. Then you get to total revenue, and total revenue is all of the revenues that you earn by selling a number of units. Okay, now suppose that a firm decides that it's going to sell a certain number of units, call it Q units, then total revenue would just be the price that they are able to sell those units at times the number of units that they sell. And so in this case, if we were to say, remember, these are small firms, so no one firm is going to produce that whole equilibrium quantity. If some firm produced a number of units here, call that Q, then the total revenue of that firm is going to be the price at which they sell times the Q units. So the revenue for that firm would be that green area right there. That would be this would be their total revenue, and this price would be their marginal revenue. Now I'm just going to show you a quick table. This comes from your textbook. I believe it's depends on which edition you're using, but it's on or about page 200 or so. And you can imagine a market in which the market price, PE, is $50 per unit. I think in the textbook, the example they're using is barrels of oil, okay, that a small firm, an individual oil rig out in Oklahoma could be pumping. And so there's one world price of oil, that's $50 a barrel in this example. And so you can see marginal revenue on unit 0, marginal revenue there is no marginal revenue because they haven't gone from producing -1 units to 0. So there's no marginal revenue there to look at. But as soon as they go from producing 0 to 1, the marginal revenue on that unit is the $50 they can sell that barrel of oil for in the market. And then the marginal revenue on the second unit is again $50, and on the third unit is $50, and so on, all the way down. Now, if you look at their total revenue, what you'll notice is total revenue is just equal to the sum of all the marginal revenues so far. So on the first unit, marginal revenue is $50. They've only sold that one unit, so their total revenue would also be $50. Or price of 50 times quantity gives you 50. Once they've produced 2 units, now they get marginal revenue. They've earned marginal revenue on the first unit. They then earn marginal revenue on the second unit. 2 times that price of $50 gives them total revenue of $100. 3 times the marginal revenue of $50 gives you $150. 4 times the marginal revenue or the price of 50 gives you $200, and so on. Okay, so notice that this total revenue number can be found by just multiplying the marginal revenue, which is the price, times the quantity of units. And also notice, if I didn't give you the price at which firms were able to sell, you could still work out their marginal revenue by looking at the total revenue numbers. Because marginal revenue is always just going to be the difference in total revenue on a particular unit versus the prior unit. So if we left this out, right, we ignored the $50 in this column, we could say, okay, total revenue is $50 at 1 unit. So total revenue has gone up by $50. That means the marginal revenue must be $50 on that unit. On the second unit, they go from earning $50 to $100. So they've earned an extra $50. So I would know that the marginal revenue on the second unit was also $50. On unit 3, they've gone from $100 to $150. Marginal revenue must once again be equal to 50. And you could calculate that all out. And lo and behold, that is exactly what the case is, right? So even if I just gave you the total revenue numbers, you should be able to see what the marginal revenue is, and you could tell me what the price in that market is. All right, so that is it for revenue. The next lecture video is going to be focusing on cost, and there is going to be significantly more things to think about with cost than there is with revenue.